Hey guys, it's Paul Wilson here again, just letting you know that we're live. A little bit of a confusion there at the start, but I can edit that out for the recorded version, so not to worry. Different time today, obviously. We're starting at 10 a.m. my time, local time for me, which actually gives people in Europe an opportunity to join without having to stay late at work or stay up late or whatever. So hopefully this works out better for everyone's schedule. I'm going to try this for a while. Today we're going to be talking about what are we talking about today? Publishing Adobe Captivate projects. But first, I wanted to share some details with you. Let me just show you my desktop here, and we'll just take a look here at what am I searching for. I typed in Adobe eLearning Conference 2020, and let's take you to the Adobe eLearning Conference 2020 website and talk about a couple of things here real quick. I don't want to use up too much of today's session on this, but a couple of things. They've updated the website recently, have this kind of new cool look and everything. And of course, you've got links right up front for the e-learning conference, which is on April 15th, but also the Adobe Captivate Specialist Certification, which is April 14th. So if you want to come in a day early and pay the registration fee to become Captivate certified or Captivate Specialist certified, you can do so. I will be one of the instructors at this conference, and I'll also be conducting a session during the conference itself. So you can check out all the details yourself here by clicking on the menu. First of all, obviously, even though the conference itself is completely free, complimentary is the word they use here. But make sure you register, because if you don't register and just simply show up, you may not have a place, because these things, because they're free, tend to fill up very quickly, tend to sell out very quickly. Last year's conference was about 1,000 people, all packed into a hotel conference area. It was crowded, but it was a great experience, of course, because we got to hear from speakers all across America and, of course, Canada as well. And certainly, a great chance to learn as well. And many of you, last year was your first opportunity to get Adobe Captivate certified. So maybe you'll be interested in that as well, coming to the conference. And if you haven't been received your Captivate Specialist certification, you can do that at the same time, or the day before rather. The agenda's been posted, so this is kind of exciting. Here's the general session. So it starts at 8 a.m. in the morning, runs till 5 o'clock-ish or so, or 5, yeah, around 5 o'clock. And the first thing will be the opening, welcome remarks, all that stuff. Typically, this is Dr. Alan Partridge, who's the head e-learning evangelist over at Adobe, and he'll be introducing what's going on. We'll have an opening keynote. I don't know anything about the keynote this year, but if there anything, anything like last year's or the year before, you should be blown away. It should be some amazing speakers coming to talk to you about what's new in learning and even other topics as well. Then they'll briefly have a what's new and upcoming from Adobe. This is a session you do not want to miss. I see a lot of comments on my videos and in the forums about, it'd be great if Adobe would provide a path or a vision of where Adobe Captivate's going. Let us know what some of the features are that are coming. That's what this is. They call it What's New and Upcoming from Adobe, but it's really a series of sneak peeks into what's happening with the software itself. And of course, if you want to know what's new for Adobe, what's going to be fixed, what's going to be changed, what's going to be improved upon. This is definitely a session you want to be in on. And then, of course, we'll go into the various breakout sessions. Breakfast and lunch are included in both these days. So as far as I'm concerned, the Adobe eLearning Conference is the best value in e-learning conferences in North America, period. When you compare it with some of the bigger conferences that are out there, there is quite frankly no comparison. Like that, obviously, you can spend many thousands of dollars going to some of the big conferences out there, and they're great and everything. I don't want to dissuade you from doing that. But in addition, if you're looking for something that's going to save you a few bucks as well, the Adobe eLearning Conference is fantastic. I won't go through all of these topics here, but suffice it to say, it looks like it's going to be a very interesting conference this year. I will point out that this one here, Create Mobile Ready create mobile ready courses using responsive quick start projects. It sure doesn't roll off the tongue, but I promise you this is going to be a really cool session. The reason I know that is because I will be giving this session and I will be sharing with you some really cool stuff that you can do. And it's not all going to be advanced stuff. I'll touch on the advanced actions a little bit, but I'll be showing you how you can very quickly build mobile-ready e-learning without really being an expert in Fluid Box's responsive design. So if you're coming to the conference, I would certainly appreciate if you came to my session, and I'm sure that once you've come to my session, you'll realize that it's a great session that you'll be glad you didn't miss. So let's go back to the webcam view for a moment here. So over to this direction is the real chat. I put it up on the screen so I can see it as well. So it's right here. So feel free to ask any questions, but today I'm going to be focusing on my desktop view. So we're going to be looking at that, and I'll go ahead and switch to that view right now here. So I've got an Adobe Captivate project open. This is actually just one of the demo projects that is available that came out in time with Adobe Captivate 2019. And we're going to talk about publishing your course. So let's say you're at that point where you've built a really great e-learning project and you're happy with it and everything's working the way you would expect it to. And it's now time to publish it for your learning management system. So what I do, I'm just going to take you through my workflow, and along the way I'm going to talk about a few things. Some really important things as well, as far as to what the recommended settings are and things like that. So one of the things I like to do, here's a little tip for you right off the bat. I like to press F9 with Adobe Captivate and open up my advanced interaction window. And this will allow you to see all of the objects that are interactive in nature. So for example, I have a bunch of Smart Shape buttons here. These are interactive objects. You can see this column. This is the one I'm very interested in right here. This is include in quiz. So, sorry, my phone just connected to my laptop there. Ah, go away. Go away. So this is the column for include in quiz. Obviously, none of these, they're just buttons. They're not included in quiz. Right here at the top, total points, 30 points. That's important to know because if you've erroneously left something that is attached to your quiz and you're going to run into scoring problems later, here's where you can find out about it. So it's worth looking at this. You can see here we've got some multiple choice questions down here below. You can see that the reporting is turned on for those. Their interaction IDs are over here, but more importantly, each question is worth 10 points each. The neat thing about the Advanced Interaction Wizard, if you click on any object within this list, including slides themselves, it will take you to the actual question slide or scoreable object. So a really good kind of audit thing I would do just before I'm ready to publish. Hey, everything looks good. My intention was to have 30 points for a quiz, and so that's fine. So I can go ahead and close this. But it's a great way to troubleshoot your e-learning project to make sure that it's set up properly to score and report the appropriate score to your learning management system. Most of the time in preparation of publishing, you're going to be using the preferences window down here. You don't need to actually use the preferences window from the edit dropdown. You can start the process off by clicking your publish icon and choosing publish for devices. Now in this example here, I'm using a responsive design project. If this was a non-responsive design project, some people call them blank projects, it would say publish for computer here, or at least it used to. I'll have to double check that. But almost everything I'm doing nowadays is mobile device ready, so it says publish for devices. Not to be confused with publish for devices app, which is another process, and I'm not going to be talking about that here today. The two other processes for publishing Adobe Captivate is publish to Adobe Connect. So if your organization was using Adobe Connect as your learning management system, some do, you can publish to Adobe Connect. And lastly, you have publish to Adobe Captivate Prime. Again, I'm not going to talk about these processes today since they're not the rule, they're more the exception. More likely you have some other third-party learning management system, and that's what we're going to focus on today. Incidentally, if you follow the publishing procedures that I use today, you can still upload that content to Captivate Prime because it will totally accept SCORM 1.2 content, which is what I'm mostly going to be focusing on today. So let's go back up here, publish for devices. And when you're publishing with a responsive design project, you're going to see this screen here. Here is the project title. Obviously, responsive design is strictly HTML5. I am going to switch gears in a little bit here, and we're going to talk a little bit about non-responsive design. But let's talk about this right now here. So here is project title, and this is literally what your zip file is going to get called. So you may want to change the name of this. You might want to call this, this could be, what is this course called anyway? Let's find out here. Let's give it a proper name. Provide Perspective, whatever that is. So let's say this is the Provide Perspective course. So I'm going to change the name of that. Provide _perspective. So that's the name of the course. It will remember this once I've published this, and all future versions will get called this as well. But I like to choose something that is no spaces, no capital letters, but that's just a personal preference of mine. I've set up my Adobe Captivate to always publish to my desktop because I always hate trying to find the published file when I'm done. The default setting is somewhere within your Documents folder in a folder called Captivate Project Files or something like that. So I don't use that. I always make it my desktop. But you can click on the folder icon and choose any location that you wish to store your zipped up e-learning course. The other thing is that if you are using Adobe fonts, formerly known as Typekit fonts, this field will be editable, and you'll be able to add domains that this course will be published on. And that's important because you can use all the fantastic Adobe fonts that you wish throughout your e-learning course, but if you don't let Adobe know what domain that you're publishing to, so like let's say you work for abclearning.com, you'd want to include star.abclearning.com here so that Adobe knows when they receive a call from abclearning.com to display these particular fonts in this particular e-learning course, they're going to authorize it and allow it. So it's important that you fill out that information here. Down here at the bottom, not a lot of information really, or not much for you to really do. A couple of things of note. And geez, I wish I could get rid of that. I'm just going to ignore that. Remind me how to turn that off sometime. I'm going to get rid of that. I know that it's great to have my cell phone pop up with notifications on my device, but it's really inconvenient when it shows up at this particular moment. Where was I here? So obviously this stuff is almost more for information purposes here. Slides 45, slides with audio 0, that will probably be an actual number. Audio settings, this is more applicable when you are actually creating your audio files, whether you're recording them or using text-to-speech. Display score at the end, yes, would be the appropriate answer here. Mobile gestures. Now let's talk a little bit about mobile gestures for a moment here. This will display two things. Well, it will do two things. It will display the little mobile palette, which will appear on your first blank slide, your playback slide. Not really part of your course, but that white slide with the big play button. You'll see a little icon in the upper right-hand corner. And when learners click on that, they'll learn that they can long tap on your e-learning course to play or pause. You can swipe right or left to go to the next slide or go to the previous slide. Pinch to zoom, and I want to emphasize pinch to zoom. Show and hide the table of contents by doing a double tap, and swiping up and down will show or hide the play bar. Now, pinch to zoom, I've recently discovered that in iPad OS and possibly in iOS, pinch to zoom, and for that matter, features like drag and drop within Adobe Captivate seem to have trouble with that operating system. So when I'm publishing a course with a drag and drop, I like to find out ahead of time if my learners are in fact using an iOS type device here, because obviously if they can't do the drag and drop, it's not much good to be able to access that e-learning on their iPad or their iOS device. So a lot of times I'll turn off gesture navigation on those slides. That's in your properties inspector, by the way. So something to keep in mind here. On this same page is geolocation. This would be used if you're running an e-learning course that takes advantage of location-aware devices. So, for example, a couple of years ago in Las Vegas, I did an e-learning project for the Adobe Learning Summit that taught people how to create a scavenger hunt that actually worked when you're outside with your cell phone, and it would pop over to certain pages when you arrived at certain locations within the Las Vegas Strip, which is kind of fun. But obviously you're not always going to have this, so you can turn that on or off as you see fit. And that's, of course, the next item here you could access. It's literally the same link, really. Accessibility, obviously, if you're making a 508 compliant course, you want to make sure that accessibility is turned on. And when you click on that, it brings you to the preferences window, and you'll see enable accessibility here. There's more to accessibility than this simple checkbox, but that's sort of the most important thing when it comes to publishing, that be enabled. Last but not least is SCORM 1.2, or e-learning output, and it's currently set for SCORM 1.2. There are a total of 4 different e-learning reporting formats available within Adobe Captivate, and we'll talk about those in just a moment here. I'm just going to open up another project here. Let's close this down. And what I'm going to do in this case here, I'm going to choose a new blank project. And instead of using that as an example, we're going to go into the Assets window and go into Projects here. And I'm going to choose, oh, what can I choose here? Let's choose the same one, but in this case here, it will be a non-responsive project, if I've done this correctly. So in a similar way, if I was ready to publish this, I would use the publish, and it would say publish to computer instead of publish for device. And while you can view a course that's a non-responsive design course on both tablet, I guess, like an iPad, and certain smartphones, in likelihood you probably wouldn't view it on a smartphone. So in this case here, there are Adobe fonts. You're going to see this warning. That's fine. It's just, confirm it by clicking next. So in this case here, you'll see a very similar publish to my computer screen, but there's some differences here. The first thing is you'll see this drop-down option here. And the first option, which for a learning management system is what you're going to choose, HTML5/SWF. But I just want to point out that you could also publish your e-learning course as a video and perhaps upload it to something like, let's say, YouTube or Vimeo, and make your course available as a passive video just to watch. But an emphasis about that is that when you publish as a video, all the interactive stuff that you've worked so hard to build, quiz questions, drag and drops, none of that stuff would function in a video, obviously. Video is just going to play the slide, play the audio, show any animation you have on screen. All that stuff will work, but anything that requires your learners to click on something, like next to continue, they won't need to do that. It will just go slide by slide through your whole course at whatever the slide duration is. And then when it comes to the end, that's the end of the video. The last option is executable. Now, at this point, I want to talk about this option as well as the second half of this option here. And it's 2020 right now. And for those in the e-learning industry, this is a significant year for us, especially Adobe users. Because this is the final year of support for any type of Flash player technologies to be used. So December 31st, 2020 is the last day that Adobe will patch Flash Player or any of the technologies within any of their products related to Adobe Flash. Adobe Flash is already discontinued. It's been replaced by Adobe Animate, and it publishes completely HTML5 content at this point. But, Adobe Captivate still has the ability to publish as a Shockwave Flash movie, if you want to call it that. And the thing about executable, everyone thinks, well, I'm just making a Windows app. Why would I worry about Shockwave Flash? What the executable really is, in this case here, is simply a Flash player, a portable Flash player with your e-learning course embedded in it. So it too is Flash and also will be going away as well. I would expect, and this is my prediction, and I don't think it's too huge a leap here, but my prediction is the next release of Adobe Captivate, whether it's called Adobe Captivate 12 or Adobe Captivate 2020, will not have anything to do with Flash in it whatsoever. All that stuff, including some other features as well, will be completely eliminated, and you'll no longer be able to publish your courses as SWF files or SWF. So that said, I want to emphasize these two buttons here. A lot of people think that a smart decision, and let me just show you something here, when they're both not pressed in, they're lighter in color. So these, I'm actually choosing nothing at this point here. If I was publishing for Flash only or Shockwave Flash, this is what it would look like. Or if I'm publishing for HTML5, this is what it would look like. But there's something I want to emphasize to you. Many people are choosing both options thinking that's a safe choice. It's actually not. And the reason being, and let me just switch to my webcam view for a moment here. The reason choosing Shockwave Flash and HTML5 and packaging it as one, you might think, oh great, well when Shockwave Flash stops working, it'll switch to the HTML5. The only circumstances that that course will use the HTML5 version of itself will be on mobile devices. So if I publish this course as Shockwave Flash and HTML5 at the same time, what you're going to end up with is still a Flash course for anyone who's trying to access that course from their computer. It's not going to switch to HTML5 when the Flash player isn't installed. It's just going to give you the same broken link connection to Flash player that you might see today. So my advice would be to only publish with HTML5 selected. Not even advice. I mean, seriously, folks, this is the only thing you should be doing. And if you have a bunch of courses that have Shockwave Flash and HTML5, a hybrid course, if you will, you need to go back and republish those as HTML5 because it's still playing the Flash player. And that might be great for Internet Explorer 11 or maybe early versions of other browsers, but all of that's going to stop functioning very soon if it hasn't already. So in this case here, I'm going to point out one other thing. Obviously, we've talked about the Adobe Fonts domain and where we're going to, what we're going to name this thing and the location. There's one other button here called Scalable HTML Content. This is really useful if you're publishing a non-responsive course, but someone might be viewing it on a smaller screen than everybody else, such as an iPad or maybe even a smartphone. You don't want them to have scroll bars in their browser to see all of the content. So what Scalable HTML Content does is it makes a version of your course that grows and shrinks depending on the screen size of the device that it's viewed upon. So that's a really useful feature. However, I'll say this, if you've designed your e-learning course to be 1024 by 627, fantastic, no problem. But remember that in addition to shrinking in size for smaller devices, it's going to stretch it for larger screens as well. So if you're viewing that course on 1920 by 1080, all of a sudden your images that you've chosen for your e-learning course are stretched out to fill the screen. And you may want to consider designing your e-learning course with a higher resolution so that it looks good on those bigger displays as well. So just a word of caution about that. Now, when you're publishing with non-responsive projects, click the More button and you'll see pretty much the same stuff we saw on the other version of this window. Audio settings, display score, mobile gestures. Yes, that's applicable here even though it's not a responsive course. Geolocation. In fact, if I recall correctly, I think my project with geolocation that I did a few years ago, and there's a video on it on my YouTube channel if you'd like to see that. I believe that also was a non-responsive course. I could be wrong. It might have been responsive. I don't remember. But currently e-learning output is disabled, so we need to enable that. Everything else is the same, but we're going to need to go in here and get this ready for a learning management system, which is what we're talking about here today. So the very first thing you need to do, you're in the Preferences window, and you're in the first section or subcategory, if you will, for quiz reporting. So you're going to want to enable reporting for this project. There is a series of choices for different type of learning management systems available here. Some of the obvious ones are Moodle. You can publish to your own internal server if you don't have a formal learning management system. I have never had an occasion to do that, but the help files within Adobe Captivate do cover how to do this, and they talk about that in greater detail than I can do here today. Other standard LMSs is the default, and that's likely where you'll be. Adobe Connect is a possibility, and there's also an LMS called Question Mark Perception that has some of its own settings. So you'd be choosing this option if you used one of these learning management systems that you see here. I'm going to leave this for other standard LMSs right now, and then move on to the standards that are available. So essentially there are 4 standards in Adobe Captivate that you can use for publishing. We're looking at SCORM 1.2, which is probably the oldest and most frequently used. More often than not, this will be the option that you're publishing for. I have actually, in all my years, some 15 years at this point of designing and developing e-learning, I have only ever published for SCORM 1.2 and SCORM 2004, which is an update from the original 1.2. Some people think that it's SCORM 1.2 is newer. No, in fact, SCORM 2004 is newer, and it has a few different options. The 3rd and 4th options are AICC and XAPI, which is also known as Tin Can, but you'll probably know it as XAPI. XAPI, of course, has the ability to incorporate lots of different interactions into every different aspect of our professional lives, and you can really tap into XAPI calls for doing things on LinkedIn, for example, or going to a particular web page and sharing content. But when it comes to an e-learning course, pretty much all you're doing is just standard e-learning reporting. But if your LMS supports it, it's probably best to choose that option. I'm going to stick with SCORM 1.2 at this point here. But again, partner with your learning and development manager or perhaps your LMS administrator and find out what e-learning standards you use. There are some templates here. I always stick with default. Before I move away from here, I'll talk about manifest files for a second. And this is something that you should be at least aware of. Generally speaking, you don't have to fill this out. But when you click on the configure, you have the option of overriding the course ID number or identifier, I should say. You can input the title of the course here and the description and version number. Let's say you're publishing this, it was once published a year earlier, and today it's been updated to version 2.0. You would input that here. There are some optional things, like you can add the duration of the course, as well as any keywords that will be searchable from the LMS, and a SCO identifier and title as well. So a SCO is a shareable content object. It's the smallest object within a SCORM module. Usually a Captivate course qualifies as a SCO, and you may have a separate identifier and title that's required here. What this means, if you don't fill this out, your LMS administrator probably has to type this out by hand. If you do fill it out, a lot of this information will be auto-populated when your LMS administrator uploads this course to the learning management system. So it's probably a good idea to fill this out. Incidentally, if you're getting stuck, and I'm going to put these links in the description of this video once we've finished here today, but there are help links in the bottom left-hand corner of all these windows that will take you to some really good help files that Adobe's provided that can remind you of what I'm covering here today, and probably with greater detail too. So let me hit cancel at that point. So now we're going to talk a little bit about two things: status representation and success completion criteria. For some reason, people get these confused, or they're confused about them. It's shown slightly different when you select a SCORM 2004. You'll see completion criteria here and success criteria. And AICC is a little bit different as well. You'll see status representation. This is closer to SCORM. and XAPI has completion criteria and success criteria, more closely associated with SCORM 2004. I'm going to stick with SCORM 1.2 again because that's mostly what I'm doing this day. I just want to pause for a moment, and we'll just take a quick peek here. There was a couple of comments here. I want to make sure those are addressed here. Let me just take a look here. And we have, let's see. Jose says, do the fonts revert to web-safe fonts if you don't reference a domain? Yeah, so what happens there is that it usually reverts to Times New Roman, or like you won't see no text, you just won't see the font that you've selected. Yeah, so Brett's commenting here. I had to do this very thing last week, republish courses in HTML5 only. So, and then Rhythm of Heaven wrote, let's see here. I get SCORM failure every time I publish on SuccessFactors, and I don't know what the problem is. I can't see the course, but the learners, I can see the course, but the learners can't. So actually, that brings up something as well. That could possibly be a number of things. The one thing I want to say is that around the time of Adobe Captivate 9, Adobe Captivate changed its publishing process to no longer publish JPEG files and PNG files and GIF files and all that stuff in their native formats. All that multimedia got converted into a series of JSON files. And there's some debate over the benefits of doing so, but delivering e-learning on mobile devices has proven to be a little bit smoother because of the use of JSON files. And it has to do with the number of times the client, the person using the e-learning course, makes a call for these different media devices. On a mobile device, there's many calls. It slows down the process. JSONs get called once, and that speeds up the process. The download's still the same, but it does increase the speed at which that gives. But what that means is that your server, this sounds convoluted, but don't worry about it too much. Your server needs to have the JSON MIME type enabled. So go to your IT department, and that's a possibility. It's only one of many possibilities as to why your course isn't working. But ask for that. Ask your IT department to enable the JSON MIME type. Another thing I recommend is that if you're running into problems with SuccessFactors LMS, for example, from your e-learning project here, try the preview method of previewing it on SCORM Cloud. SCORM Cloud is maintained by, I want to say Rustici or Rustici or whatever. These are the guys behind SCORM. And so if it works there and doesn't work in your LMS, something's wrong with your learning management system. So try previewing it in SCORM Cloud. If that works, then it's not an issue with your course. It's not an issue with SCORM itself. It could be your learning management system. TJ wrote here, I'm designing a new student orientation course. Do you think I should just include a button that allows them to click finished to give them credit for completing the course? No, and I'll show you why, TJ. That's actually coming up here. Let me switch back to my desktop view here so we can continue at this point. And actually, this is kind of related here. So status representation. When you finish something like an e-learning course in your LMS, what do you want it to say? And that's really what this is about. Obviously, if you haven't completed it, in both cases here, it's going to show as incomplete. But if you've successfully completed it based on the criteria below, do you want it to simply say complete? Or do you want it to say passed or possibly failed? And in most cases, it's probably passed or failed. But let's say you've created an e-learning course like what TJ is talking about, and there's no quiz, right? There's nothing in the course that says, did you get this answer right or that answer wrong or whatever. It's just simply they start at the beginning and they get to the end. Well, that's when you would then choose probably incomplete and complete, and then set your success completion criteria based on what it is that you need them to do in order for them to be successful or complete in this case here. So maybe it's something as simple as user access. As long as they launch the course, hey, they're good to go, right? Most people, I don't agree with that. I think that's too simple because, if they've launched the course, I don't know if they've actually navigated through the whole course. So at the very least, I would suggest that you select slide views and or quiz. So I'm going to uncheck quiz in this case, and we're going to go with slide views. Now, the only thing I'll say here is be careful about courses that include optional content. For example, if I have my e-learning course and I have a bunch of slides in my course, like let's say a table of contents slide or a list of terms or glossary, and those are optional slides. Someone maybe has to click on a button to be brought to those pages and then click the back button to be returned to the regular linear narration or linear approach to the course. The difficulty with those is that if someone doesn't use the glossary or someone doesn't use the optional information or whatever it might be, they could end up being considered incomplete or unsuccessful. So make sure that you include either 100% or 90% of the course or 80% of the course, or probably the best approach would be to select the number of slides that they must view. So if you know that there's 100 slides in this course, but 5 of them may not get visited, you want to say once they viewed 95 slides, they're good to go. So that's how I would do that. And then leave quiz unchecked so that there's no passing or failing or number of points achieved. They just need to view 95 of the 100 slides and they're good to go. And this would mark them as complete. Now, more often than not, you're going to include some sort of assessment. So let's say, for example, you need to pass the assessment, and the assessment requires a passing grade of 70%. So you're going to choose the status representation of incomplete, passed, failed, right? Because if they've started it but not finished it, it will show incomplete. If they've finished it but they failed, it's going to show failed. And if they've passed it, it's going to show passed. Now, the actual success completion criteria is not going to be slide views, but instead the quiz is passed. And I'll show you that in a few moments where you set that up. Now, there is another possibility as well that you can actually require two things, slide views and quizzes passed. So they must view all the slides and they must pass the quiz. But here's the thing. I always think about my subject matter experts. So, for example, I think of projects that I worked on when I worked at my last full-time job. We were all required to complete training. 100% of us had to complete training. I had to do my own training, which is crazy. But it's true. That's what had to happen. But my subject matter experts, these are the guys who taught me what I needed to know to build the e-learning course in the first place. So, I don't necessarily need them to view all the slides. As far as I'm concerned, if you can skip forward, get to the quiz, and if it's a well-written quiz, that's important. It has to be an actually effective e-learning quiz, an actual assessment that truly tests all the learning objectives and to such a degree that proves that they are truly proficient in this knowledge and skill. If that's true, then I'm totally okay with them skipping the content, going straight to the quiz, and passing the quiz. If someone can get 100% on one of my quizzes, they've satisfied that objective for me. So in my case here, I'm more likely going to uncheck slide views and only choose quizzes passed. There's been an occasion where the rounding rules for my LMS were different than Adobe Captivate for some reason. Generally, I leave the quiz score as a percentage, but if you run into those sorts of problems, reporting the number of points might be a better way to go, and that lets the LMS calculate the actual percentage rather than Adobe Captivate. LMS initialization text. This used to be more important than it is today, but this is basically something that would appear on the screen as the course is loading, as the course shell is loading, to let learners know that it's loading. And I used to actually have a couple of periods after that, just to give them a sense that, hey, wait for this. This is something that's happening. For the last number of years, and really with HTML5, very seldom does anyone even see this, so I don't really worry too much about that. The last thing I want to draw your attention to on this page is the Advanced button here. And this is your LMS Advanced settings. Now, I'll be very frank and honest with you. The last two options, escape version and session ID, as well as don't escape characters, my understanding is these are the URL-based versions of a course completion code, essentially. And it really only applies to AICC. So I've honestly never used them. But these first two options, send data on every slide, that might be important if your company's network connection is constantly being reset. The reason that might be important is that if someone's halfway through a course and the company's network goes down, at least your data of how you're progressing through the course, as well as any quiz questions you've already answered, has been fed at the end of every slide to the learning management system. By default, when you're using a learning management system, you have bookmarking enabled. Most learning management systems enable bookmarking. There may be occasions, and if your organization is one that feels that if I exit a course early on Monday and I go to attempt that course again on Tuesday, your organization might say, well, no, they can't resume the course partway through. They have to start from the beginning again. You would want to check the second option, which is never send resume data, that's bookmarking, to the LMS. So if I exit prematurely, or if for some reason my Captivate session has crashed and I'm locked on a slide that I can't navigate away from, this actually proves to be beneficial because you'll start over at the beginning of the course and you can make another attempt. So you would check this if you don't want bookmarking for your e-learning course. So I'm going to hit cancel at that point, and we're going to just talk a little bit about settings and this last section here, pass or fail. Let's look at settings first. You can give your quiz a specific name that might be important to you or your organization. This is a drop down here that selects whether the quiz is optional, required, pass required, or answer all. Now, I know that in theory, we want everyone to take the quiz and to complete it and be successful and all that. And optional sounds like it's counterintuitive to that goal. But again, I don't even show this to my stakeholders because they go, oh, absolutely, it's required and they must pass and they must answer all the questions. But these three other options are very restrictive in navigating a course. So I usually leave it optional, but you must understand that if you set a course to be required, a user must complete the quiz in order to move forward. So if there are slides after the quiz results slide, they will not be able to navigate to those slides if they haven't attempted the quiz or completed the quiz. If a pass is required, again, it won't let them move beyond the assessment unless they've passed. And if they must answer every question, they have to choose something on every single question slide. I find that for most people, leaving it as optional is fine. The objective ID is auto-generated for you, but if you need to change it or modify it for some reason, you certainly can do so. It's an editable field. And there's an interaction ID prefix. So every question, every interaction that is reportable in your e-learning course is reportable to your LMS. You may wish to put a prefix. So in other words, everything in this course is an HR course. So you might want to start this with HR underscore, and that will get attached to all the interaction ID data that's uploaded to the LMS. That might be important for reporting purposes. Again, in 15 years, I've never filled this out, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. The next group of settings here relates to the questions themselves. So if you have a whole bunch of multiple choice questions and you haven't done anything like turn on shuffle answers, you can do so in one shot right from here. So it's going to apply that to every single one of your multiple choice questions. One thing to bear in mind is watch out for all of the above questions. So if you are someone who likes to use all of the above, obviously it's going to shuffle those questions as well. You may need to go back and turn that off for that specific question. You can add clear, back, and skip or next buttons for all of your question slides. And by default, review mode navigation buttons are turned on, but you may have a reason to turn them off if you wish. I don't see why you would, but you could. One of my favorite additions to Adobe Captivate, and this is a couple of versions old now, is the ability to turn on Submit All. And what Submit All does is allows people to move around the quiz freely using navigation controls and use the Submit button, which now becomes a Submit All button, to submit all your questions all at once. So if you answer the first 2 or 3 questions and you change your mind about them, you can go back to those questions and change your answer. And when you choose Submit All, you'll see that this button appears and allows you to go in and edit the various, the title, the dialogue title for the Submit All messages, the message itself, whether it's complete, incomplete, or submit incomplete. And then, of course, you have a bunch of buttons, and you can change the labels on those. And this is useful if you're doing localization, translation to another language, as I've done here in Canada. We speak both French and English, so that's useful. And in courses, and this is something that comes up from time to time for me, if I have a single course but multiple audiences that might be taking this course. I'll give you an example. I did this training course for the Toronto International Airport when I worked there, and there's employees who work in Terminal 1 and there's employees who work in Terminal 3. Don't ask me about Terminal 2, it doesn't exist anymore. But Terminal 1 and 3 are where everyone works. If you work in Terminal 3, the procedure is different. If you work in Terminal 1, the procedure is different. So I would set up 2 separate quizzes for these folks, and they would learn 2 different sets of practices. And at the beginning of the course, they would simply select which terminal they worked in, and they would see the content that was appropriate for them. For such a course, you don't want them to get marked incorrect for all the answers that they didn't select or submit. And that would be, for the Terminal 3 folks, they're not answering the questions to Terminal 1. So you're going to want to turn on branch aware. And that's simply a checkbox here. Show progress is the question 1 of 5, question 2 of 5, and so on. You can make it relative or you can make it absolute. In the case of absolute, it's just question 1, question 2, question 3, something I prefer. And then, of course, we have our show score at the end of quiz. Quiz results messages. You can have 1 of 2. Congratulations, you passed. Sorry, you failed. And then you can check off all of these data points that you wish to display to your learner here. Allow user to review the quiz. I usually turn that off because my feeling is that if you weren't successful with the quiz the first time, I need you to go back and take the course again. So I don't want you to review and find all the answers. So you could uncheck this and that option would be not available. If you do check it, you'll see these messages and you can edit these and customize them how you will. So if you didn't complete the answer, you can say you did not answer this question, correct, partially correct, incorrect, and what the correct answer is. And you can provide all of that information to the learner when they're reviewing the quiz. Again, I like to turn that off. I also like to hide the play bar in the quiz. That way they can't necessarily navigate back just to find the answers somewhere in the course. I guess some people would argue, well, who cares? They're learning anyway. But that's up to you. And last but not least, I'll just quickly touch on default labels. So before you start building your course, if you want custom correct messages and incorrect messages, make sure that you edit these values here, these fields here. Once you've built a course, making changes here will have no impact on your quiz questions themselves. And let's jump back up to pass or fail. A lot of people have trouble understanding this, but this is pretty straightforward, or can be. So 70% is to pass in this particular case. And think of these as the actions associated with the quiz results slide. So when you arrive on your quiz results slide, there's a continue button that's there. And what do you want the action associated with that continue button to be? It could be simply to continue playing the slide when they press that button, in which case it would then take them to the next slide and the next slide and so on. More often than not, I would say I set my continue button to simply exit the course. So it will still continue playing that slide, but once it gets to the end of the slide, the quiz results slide, it will kick you out and exit the course. I usually only allow users 1 attempt to pass because, again, if I want them to, to take it again, I don't want them to just take the quiz again. I want them to take, if they weren't successful the first time, what makes them think they're going to pass the second time? They need to go back and look at the content and figure out what it was that they didn't pass. So I always give them 1 attempt, or you can set it up to be infinite attempts, in which case you can check to show a retake button. You'll notice that if it's infinite attempts, there is no failing action. So, if you wanted to have a failing action, maybe uncheck infinite attempts, show, let's say, 10 attempts, and still show a retake button. But the continue button on the quiz results slide, if they failed, maybe it does the same thing. Maybe it exits the course, or maybe it runs an advanced action, or does something else. There's a lot of options here for you. But generally, this is how I would set up a course. Probably only 1 attempt and exit in both cases. And then I allow the learning management system to manage that process. So then I've got all my settings good. I've made some changes here, so clicking OK sometimes takes a few moments to initiate all those changes. And then I'm good to actually finish publishing. In which case, just go ahead and click Publish. Let's put in a Adobe Fonts domain. I often preview my courses on Amazon.com. using their AWS server. So I'll just put in star.amazon.com, and I find sometimes it's star.amazonaws.com as well. So I go ahead and hit publish. Oh, it's looking for that folder, which doesn't exist because this was not my course originally. I'll just save it to my desktop. Publish, and you'll see the usual publish progress window. You'll see some optimizing at the end. That's when it's taking your file types and converting them to JSON and making sure that they're nice and compact before they get published into the zip file. While we're waiting for that to do its thing, let's just go back to the webcam view where we can see the chat window as well. It looks like Chris was saying here, in my first publishing experiment, the videos in the module did not publish. Any thoughts on why they didn't? Normally what happens, Chris, let me go to, actually this will be convenient. Let's go back to the desktop. So, I mean, I guess a lot depends on where those videos came from, what format they were in, things like that. They should be MP4, H264, whatever it is. I can't remember the format, but MP4 is generally safe. And what's going to happen when you publish your course is it's going to put those in a special folder. When this is done, I'll be able to show that to you. It's creating the zip right now. We'll just go back to TJ's thoughts here. Thanks so much. This has been a great learning experience. You're welcome, TJ. It's I never really know because I've been doing pretty much the same thing for 10 years or so. So I don't know if I'm giving you something you didn't have before, but I'm glad to hear that that you've learned from this, and hopefully it's been helpful to you. And I say that to everybody, of course. Let's take a look at my desktop. So there's the folder. I'm just going to unzip this for a moment here and talk a little bit about the structure of this. Any videos that would have been, and here's an example of one here. Any videos that are used in your e-learning project end up in this VR folder, not to be confused with virtual reality. It's just video. And you'll find like audio will be in the AR folder, and I don't know what's in the SVGs and graphics and images, all the JSON files, which were formerly JPEGs, for example, will appear in this folder, and video will appear here. Now it will relabel the video and give it its own name, which is unfortunate. I would prefer it kept the original name, but hopefully that is where you can troubleshoot that. Possibly, it's possibly in there, but again, just check the formatting. Make sure that the video, if there's something wrong with it, it could be why it's not publishing, but you can always shoot an email to captivatehelp@adobe.com, and they can help you troubleshoot that. Those are the folks over at Adobe there. So that's it pretty much for the formal part of today's live stream. So I hope that everyone saw value in what I was able to present today. I know that, I see a lot of questions to do with publishing and understanding. I know this actually came from someone commenting on my YouTube channel, mentioning that, of course, they didn't understand all the nuances, and hopefully I've given you some of that. I could probably talk for another 2 hours about publishing in general, because there's also video, there's also the upload to YouTube process, and again, the EXE thing, which again, don't do. If there's one thing you learned from today, I hope it's this. Stop selecting SWF as a publishing format, because you're just giving yourself more work later, and might be even more immediate than you realize, because with, I've just found out that we're on Chrome 80, which is about to come out this February. So it's 80 versions of a browser. Like, holy smokes. You don't even notice that it being updated, but of course it's being constantly updated in the background. And of course, that has an impact on your e-learning as well. One of these days, they're just going to completely shut off the ability to install Flash Player entirely. And I think that's probably going to be true for most browsers, the exception being Internet Explorer. But remember, with Internet Explorer, other than security patches and things like that, they're not updating that software. So you should really encourage your IT department to stop using Internet Explorer. A lot of corporations use it because it's compatible with some old application that they've been using for a decade. Well, it's time to deal with that and put that aside and start using a modern browser. You know, it's funny, on one side, the organization you work for will be telling you, oh no, we want modern e-learning. We want all this new technology. We want all the latest interactions and all that cool stuff. But yet they'll cling to an old browser because it works with an application they paid $1 million for 15 years ago. So anyway, guys, as always, thanks. For those that are interested in the Adobe e-learning conference, there's links in the description below. Check it out. And if you're interested in getting your Captivate Specialist certification, I will be one of the instructors in Washington, D.C. But check their website too. If you go to elearning.adobe.com/events, you'll see that there's a whole slew of other locations where the Captivate Specialist certification is going to be offered this year in 2020. And it's a very good possibility I might be your instructor in one of those locations. So thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next time. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share with your colleagues. If you need help with your next e-learning project, hire me. My focus is to create effective e-learning that achieves your business goals. Visit my website at CaptivateTeacher.com, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel.